Hello, my name's Ed. Welcome to my channel, The Inclusion Crowd. Today's video is an open message of support to the trans community. It's a bit of a rant about my lack of tolerance for any more BS about trans people not being natural or legitimate members of society. And with the JK Rowling debate hot in the press, I wanted to call out 5 key things. There are many, but just 5 key things where she's really got it wrong. So coming in at number 5, JK Rowling said that she's worried about the dangers to young people and gay people and the erosion of women's and girls' rights. The trans rights movement and trans people don't want their rights to come at the cost of anybody else's. Nobody's saying that. Why are you making that up? That doesn't exist. Nobody's saying that trans rights should come at the cost of anybody else's rights. So you've started the whole thing and framed it in that way. It's the winning of somebody and the losing of somebody else. And actually that's just BS, and you need to be called out for that. Now, I have full empathy for JK Rowling as being the victim of violence and abuse. That is unacceptable. We can't allow that in our society. Stop linking that to the trans community. Unacceptable. Really, really wrong. And it's got nothing to do with your right about free speech. You have free speech. I would fight to live in a society that everybody has free speech. That's not what this is about. It's about saying stuff that isn't true, and that's the reason that you're being called out. So coming in at number 4, she says, when you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes that he feels like a woman. Can you see how emotive that language is? Can you see that she's an author? That's really naughty. Nobody's suggesting we throw open the doors. And by the way, the last time I went to the public swimming pool, the receptionist didn't say to me, that'll be £5.50, love, and can you show us a copy of your birth certificate? Rubbish. What a rubbish, stupid argument. If on the one hand you're talking about, I'm worried about opening the doors of changing rooms to anybody who fancies coming in, or you're talking about the Gender Recognition Act, they're 2 totally separate things. Stop merging them and making them this muddy, hysterical nonsense. The Gender Recognition Act's been about since 2004, so for the last 16 years or more, people have been able to use facilities that are appropriate for how they identify from a gender perspective. So that's been happening for 16 years, and to say that you just wake up and you decided to be a woman today is BS, because it takes a process. You need to be engaged with medical and psychological support. It's a long, drawn out, lengthy process. You don't just wake up and go, oh, I'll be a woman today. So to frame it in that way is destructive and wrong and disingenuous, and you shouldn't do it, Jake. Coming in at number 3, she says most women oppose the changes around trans access to women's toilets. The evidence doesn't support what you're saying. In fact, people who are opposed to trans rights often cite this issue about being scared about their privacy being violated in the bathroom and all that sort of stuff. That's what people who are opposed to trans rights often cite as the reason. But the study found that the passage of such laws is not related to the frequency of criminal incidences in these spaces. Additionally, the study finds reports of privacy and safety violations in public restrooms, locker rooms, changing rooms are exceedingly rare. The study provides evidence that fears of increased safety and privacy violations as a result of non-discrimination laws are not empirically grounded. So if we're going to talk about a conversation, let's have it right and say it like it is. To do otherwise is really, really inappropriate. Men who prey on vulnerable women is a worldwide problem. It's got nothing to do with trans people. Stop putting the blame for what these men do on trans people, in particular trans women. On the contrary, it's trans people who are generally far more worried about accessing toilets and changing rooms, because the cisgendered women that are in there often turn around and give them abuse for being in the wrong toilet, or so they say. In fact, one of my closest friends was assigned female at birth, so was born a female and identifies as non-binary. And the shit that they get from women in toilets about looking androgynous is just really disgusting and happens frequently. So this is a person who was born female and is using female toilets. And the nightmare that they get is disgusting. So much so that they have to consider how much water they drink in a day. Because they don't want to have to use the toilet, because they don't want to face this abuse. So if again we're going to have a real conversation about abuse in toilets and abuse in changing rooms, it's not cisgendered women who are being abused in toilets today. It's just not. Coming in at number 2, she said that she's read all the arguments about femaleness not residing in the sexed body, and that biological women don't have common experiences, and she finds it deeply misogynistic and regressive. Well, Mermaids have pointed her to leading biological research, and in particular a leading professor of biology, Rebecca Helm, who I've put details in the links below, who reference and basically remind us that biological sex is really messy. There's stuff that happens in utero. There's stuff that happens in fetal development that we know, we can see, we can physically see. And when we talk about chromosomes, and I'm, scraped through GCSE science, so I'm no expert, but I get the basic concept, right? 2 X chromosomes and it's female, an XY chromosome and it's male. Got it. But actually there's one gene that links to those chromosomes that's responsible for sex, and it's called the SRY gene. And during embryonic development, that SRY gene that's responsible for turning on male associated genes, right? So you've got your chromosomes, and the SRY gene's responsible for the male switching on of male associated genes. It can sometimes pop off the Y chromosome and attach to the X chromosome. That changes things up, doesn't it? It's a complicated subject, but the point is well made that biology, genetics, chromosomes, and how that all develops is messy and complicated. And the research is in the description below, so check that out. But most offensive. Coming in at number 1, Mermaids charity purposely didn't quote her remarks because they didn't want to give it any airtime, but they made reference to the fact that she implied there was no link between preventing young people from transitioning and suicidal thoughts. We would all do well to tread carefully because the actual statistics are a national disgrace. If this was the general population of children, we would be outraged and we would see national campaigns and it would be headline news. But because it's a small section, small demographic of the LGBT community, we're not as outraged as we should be. But listen to this. Half of trans young people have attempted suicide. I mean, let that sink in. Process that for a second. Half of all trans young people have attempted suicide. Now, we as adults need to recognize the consequences of this hysterical argument that we're having. This nonsense we're having in the press. What we're doing to our society is having a direct impact on young people's lives today, where up to half of them are trying to kill themselves. And that's why we have to be so responsible. And that's why JK Rowling and the likes are being called out for feeding this machine of hate and intolerance. Because the consequence on the individuals who are feeling it and the consequences of on their families are so huge and so profound that we cannot allow it to slide. So just for the avoidance of doubt, not about free speech, but about talking rubbish that is having a negative impact on an already marginalised community. It must stop, and we can't allow it to carry on. Isn't it interesting that this whole trans argument's focused on trans women? Essentially this fear that men have put dresses on. You don't hear about non-binary people. You don't hear about trans men. People assigned female at birth who are transitioning to be men. We don't hear about that. That doesn't seem to be as much of a threat as an issue to us. So in the UK, we need to be clear about some of the trans issues. The Gender Recognition Act is a piece of legislation about a trans person changing the details on their birth certificate, right? It's got nothing to do with changing rooms, locker rooms, bathrooms, same-sex spaces. But reading the headlines, don't get fooled. Don't get sucked into this stupid argument. The two things are not the same, and don't let people confuse the issues because it's wrong. And we need to support the trans community by at the very least having conversations that reflect reality. We've got to stand up for the vulnerable and the marginalised. If you believe in equality, and we've talked about Black Lives Matter, and we've talked about disability, and we've talked about age and gender and all of the things that are wrong in society, if you believe in equality in all of those spaces, you've got to believe in equality for trans people and LGBT people as well. I'm putting together another video on LGBT communities throughout our history. And when I say our history, I mean 300,000 years. And I can show that LGBT communities have lived in our societies and in our civilizations way before most of the modern religions and way before modern civilization that we understand today. So to get informed when that video comes out, just click the bell, and when I put it up, you'll get notified of that or other videos as they come out. In the meantime, honestly, thanks so much for watching. It means a huge amount. If you want to help me to grow this channel and continue to talk about some of these things, the one thing that you can do is just hit the subscribe button. In the meantime, take care out there, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks.